And welcome. Are we on the air or on recording?
CCTV is on, and I'm
Great.
also recording.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome everybody to the regular meeting of the Board of Electric Commissions for BED in Burlington, Vermont. This is Wednesday, November 4th, starting up a little bit past 5:30. Apologies for that. And first up on the agenda is the agenda itself, whether or not there are any modifications or requested edits.
Not from here.
Great.
Bob's on.
Yep,
Welcome, Bob. Glad you
Yeah.
can join.
the usual problems, but I'm on, yes.
Great. Good to see you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And maybe mute for now, unless that's me. Could be. Next up is the minutes of the October 14th, 2020 meeting. If folks have had a chance to read through them, review them. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, so I will be abstaining my vote of approval, but we do have at least 3 other committee members here, so I will let you all handle this next portion in terms of if there are edits or changes.
None here.
I'll stay here.
I'm good here. Sorry. Yeah, I'll sit here too.
Great. So then if we could have a motion to approve
Move to approve as presented.
and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Oop.
Commissioner Shagnon,
Aye.
Commissioner Herendeen,
Aye,
Commissioner Moody,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins. Oh, you're abstaining. I'm sorry.
I'm going to abstain.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Next up, we have the public forum. I don't see any unusual abbreviated first and last names, but that doesn't mean there isn't someone from the public here.
There is no one from the public.
Thank you, Lori. Well, so for folks who might view at a later time, please know that you're always welcome to give a call to the staff. Their hours are up on their website, frequently starting at 7:30. And you're also always welcome to reach out to any of the 5 commissioners or attend our future meetings. We have shifted back during COVID to our normal 5:30 Wednesday PM start time. Thanks, Scott. I think that's important. Next, we'll move up to Commissioner's Corner. Is there anything anyone would like to say or add or contribute before we begin the meeting?
No, I'm off that.
All good here.
Bob, just hit the mute.
okay. I was just thinking what the consequences of the $100 per ton fee might be for me and my house. I hadn't run through the numbers. I did, and it would be about $3,700 for that 10-year period. Is that paid up front if you don't electrify?
I think I can address that. This relates to one of the items in the update. The policy would not apply to you at your home.
Darren, could you,
Yeah.
for folks who might be viewing, could you give a little bit more background? It wasn't the update, but perhaps people weren't watching or, didn't read in advance.
No, absolutely. So as part of our work on net zero energy and on policy, we Burlington Electric, along with the Office of City Planning and the Permitting and Inspections Department, have put together a proposal to the City Council, which will be reviewed potentially this month in the Ordinance Committee, related to building electrification and decarbonization. and it's intended to apply to new construction projects. So that's why I was addressing Commissioner Herendeen. It would not apply to an existing building or to an existing home. But for new construction projects, it would set up a structure where there would be, if the building was going to connect to fossil fuels for thermal needs, there would be a policy where there would be $100 a ton fee on the carbon emissions that would be paid upfront, to answer your question, Commissioner Herendeen, based on a net present value calculation, would be paid upfront as part of the building permitting process. And that's of course, that's our proposal that hasn't been acted on yet by the City Council.
Okay, thanks. I didn't think it applied to me. I was just running through some numbers. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Herendeen, if I may also add, Vermont has a goal of all new construction to be net zero by design by 2030. So in some ways, this aligns nicely with that, particularly because, if by 2031 you can't actually even build a fossil fuel system within the building, it's pretty much direct alignment.
Yep. Second comment, there's some stuff in our packet about electrification efforts in Cambrian Rise, but my impression was still that they have a lot of gas there, or is that changing?
I think that for the update that was in the packet, my understanding of what they're looking at is a significant heat pump investment that would handle a good chunk of the heating needs. I believe there is still gas use envisioned there as well for some backup situations and possibly some other thermal needs. So it's not, I don't believe it's being proposed as a 100% electric facility, but I believe there is a significant investment being contemplated in heat pumps.
Okay, but that's great, because not so long ago it was proposed as 100% gas.
Chris Burns and our energy services team have been working very closely and are working on making sure that that we can provide, obviously, incentives for buildings like that to move in the direction of heat pumps as well.
Thank you.
From my corner, I wanted to follow up on an email that was exchanged about from Commissioner Herendeen from you. I was not part of the October meeting, but I did see some emails. I wanted to just make sure that they were addressed in a manner that met Commissioner Herendeen's requests.
Are you talking about the question of units?
Well, there was a question of units, and there are a few other questions, but
yeah, I'm happy to make the comment. I'll let the system respond as it wishes. I didn't see it as a pressing thing that I wanted to press.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
So we can follow up later. If
I don't need a response right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Other commissioners, Jim, Scott?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Scott, I'll trust you'll raise your hand or whatnot if you do have something to add. So next up is the general manager's update. This is an oral update followed by the fiscal year 2020 audit update and then financials. So thank you, Darren.
Thank you. So we will talk a little bit about our financials in a moment. I did just want to note for the commission that year to date for fiscal 21, we are seeing a positive variance for our budget, which is certainly welcome, something that we're happy to see. But we are, with Andrea's leadership, doing even more precise forecasting relative to the remaining months of the fiscal year. I know commissioners are very used to hearing the words, "This is a timing issue," and we're bringing some kind of greater structure to that phrase by doing enhanced forecasting to see what types of timing issues, how they may play out in the next months of the fiscal year. So we are seeing some challenges still ahead in this budget, not only challenges that may be structural related to timing issues, but also continued challenges from COVID-19, whether that is still seeing lower sales than might otherwise be the case, and that affecting revenues, possibly seeing, as we're into what some are terming a potential third wave, whether that will affect our ability to conduct capital work through the remainder of this budget, and how it will affect our posture. So our team is tracking the budget very closely, tracking performance. We're pleased with where we are, I think, year to date, but we have a lot of work to do to have a positive result at the end of the fiscal year. So I wanted the commission to be aware we're tracking this closely. Relatedly, again, related to COVID, we're doing some work with our Center for Safety team, thinking through as we enter these cold weather months. We've had a pretty strong effort with a rotation at Pine Street and obviously with our teams in the generation facilities to minimize unnecessary exposure, to conduct work, capital work, particularly outdoors when possible. But we are aware that in inclement weather, we could have a situation where a number of folks who might be working outdoors on projects would be brought indoors. We're going to seek to minimize congregation of employees indoors at 585 Pine Street, and try to plan ahead when we see inclement weather to make sure that we only bring the necessary folks on site and keep folks, on standby as opposed to having larger groups congregating indoors. We also have a new updated city face mask policy that's, I would say, even more stringent. And is going to ensure that there's many circumstances where employees are working, they're going to have face masks on. Our Center for Safety team is acting as the health officers for Burlington Electric and ensuring compliance with that policy and all of our other health-related policies. So we continue to be vigilant in the face of the rising COVID cases around the state and around the country that we've seen. Act 151, which was the Senate Bill 337, which allows us to spend a portion of our efficiency funds on efforts and initiatives, programs that are complementary to our Tier 3 programs and our net zero energy programs. We are engaged in some PUC and Department of Public Service process around what implementing that is going to look like for BED. It requires going in and rethinking our demand resource plan for efficiency, our budget, and potentially our rate for efficiency for the upcoming 3-year period. And we're working with the regulators on that. We're going to be proposing programs to seek to take advantage of the new authority that's been provided under that bill. And I think it's conceivable, based on the timelines I'm aware of, that we may be able to provide a more thorough briefing on some of what we're thinking related to that at the next time we gather with the commission. So more to come on Act 151, but that's kind of the status of it at the moment. District energy, we've been, as the commissioners know, we had given some time for the UVMMC team over the summer to address their level of work. Obviously was increased intensity due to COVID. We had re-engaged with their facilities team more recently, had very constructive conversations around advancing district energy with our partners at VGS and Evergreen. And we're beginning to close out what we've termed the phase 2 work of this project. And we're hoping to report out on it in the near future. We had some more recent conversations with UVMMC that had to be, or in the process of being rescheduled. As everyone's aware, they've had a significant network outage issue that's affecting their entire team. So we are standing by to reschedule some of those conversations and pick that topic back up in the near future when they are ready. But I wanted to give the commission a status update on that, let folks know where we were. And then finally, I just wanted the commission to know that we've been engaged in some great events with the community despite the pandemic over the last several weeks. Mike Canerick and Brian Riley have been doing virtual visits with our 4th grade classes in the public schools in Burlington to kick off the calendar contest, the Net Zero Energy Calendar Contest for 2021. Entries are due, I think, in the very near future, and we're looking forward to seeing some great artwork from the 4th graders. We also had a great Halloween event with the Lake Monsters, an outdoor, socially distanced trick-or-treating opportunity where different Lake Monsters partners could talk with members of the community, and kids dressed up and came to different tables to trick-or-treat. Was a really successful event. I think they originally planned for having 2 or 3 half-hour sessions. They ended up selling out 5 sessions, and appreciate Mike and James for being out there. I was able to join for a little while as well. And then lastly, we did our annual contribution to CVOEO's Warmth program recently to support our customers who may be facing a heating emergency or having challenges with paying their utility bills during the winter season. We have bill inserts and messages to customers going out in our bills now to encourage customers to join us in supporting warmth. We also are continuing to advance the state's arrearage program as well for customers who may have fallen behind on their bills and are eligible for that assistance. So just been a great series of events to engage with our community and our customers in these new ways that we've had during this period. So I think that covers the items I was hoping to update from the report. Glad to answer any questions or turn it over to Andrea for the financials.
Did I see a hand raised by JG? I'm assuming that's James Gibbons, or was that an accident?
That was a mouse accident.
Okay, great.
So I was going to mention, we also had a meeting with a group from Kyrgyzstan, and Jen Green and I met with an international women's group to talk about renewability and sustainability in the last couple of years.
Cool.
Those were really interesting meetings.
Love to hear more at some point. Darren, could you give a little bit more background on with regards to information services, the unexpected AMI system outages, and then also what the DPS net metering data request was?
Yeah, I think I'd be happy to. I think Emily might be better situated to give the update on the smart grid outage that was touched on in the report, and I would defer to James to talk about the net metering request.
You want to do first, Emily? Go first.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So yeah, it was we had an equipment failure actually, and we had a backup, and the system was architected we had assumed there would be an auto failover, and there wasn't. So to sort of make a long story short, we were able to restore to the backup, get the network back going, and our replacement device for the equipment that it failed has been ordered, and we're expediting installation as soon as possible.
And what does that mean in a tangible way?
It meant that reads from the meters were being collected, but not able to be sent back to the collection engine, so to speak. So the data was sort of sitting on the meters, but couldn't get back to us until the network was restored. And then there was sort of a catch-up period where the meters sent back all the information they had been holding, but not able to transmit for that period of time.
Great.
Does that help?
Yeah, so you'll end up catching it up later.
Yes, correct. Yep. And it was, a delay in the billing cycles that had been scheduled, but the team was able to get caught back up very quickly.
Right.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it was not a distribution outage situation. There was no issue with that. This was a billing and meter data issue.
Right.
And also, I think the meters continued to store the data. We just couldn't obtain it in a real-time basis.
And James, if you don't mind touching on the net metering data request.
there was a very voluminous request to all of the distribution utilities from the Public Service Department regarding net metering. In particular, the request for data related to calendar 2019. They asked us for information by tier of net metering or by class of net metering, because net metering is now divided into a number of different classes based on size and location. They asked us to provide the revenue impact of the lost revenues, the amount we've paid out in terms of siting adjusters and rec adjusters. And then they also asked us to provide a valuation of how much the utility saved in the wholesale market from those same assets. And it was, it's not something we had on hand. It was work that had to be done to turn it into that valuation at the wholesale market level, and to do it by net metering tier was a challenge too, but Burlington Electric was able to provide all of the requested data by the DPS, I'm very pleased to say.
Thanks, James. If I may, so it looks like critical to everything BED, the IT Forward initiative is continuing, working on contracts, and that's sort of the summation at this point. I just can't wait for it to kick in gear.
You're not the only one. But yes, there's a team of folks, Emily and Munir and Sue and James and others who have been involved in the contract review scoping process, and we are hopeful to be nearing the end of that in the not distant future and beginning implementation starting with our MDM.
Okay, thank you. Just keeping an eye on that. Andrea, thanks for joining. You always have the most professional background. I don't know where you are, but thanks for giving us the financials.
Yep, I'm in my basement.
It looks great.
So I'll start with an update on FY20. The last that we all got together, KPMG joined us and they gave the update that the audit was going well. They were getting the information that they needed and they planned to issue an unmodified or clean audit opinion. And since then, we finished up the audit and they did issue the unmodified opinion for BED and for McNeil. So that all kind of ironed out smoothly. And I included the face of the financials in the commission packet, and I'm going to share my screen here and just touch on some highlights.
And while you share your screen, I just want to make a nod to Jim, because he certainly worked really hard on this. So
definitely, yeah. Okay, and you're able to see my screen here? Okay, so I'll start with the statement of net position. Total assets for the year were fairly in line with last year, increased about $400K. I'll just start at the top and call out some highlights. Capital assets decreased $1.1 million. We had additions of about $4 million, and then that's offset by a little bit of disposals and our annual depreciation.
Would you mind bumping up the size just a little bit for these old man eyes?
Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay. Here we go. So cash and cash equivalents increased about $800K, and that has a variety of factors that go into it, and you'll see that when we get to the cash flow statement. And restricted cash, this is a new line item on here for energy efficiency utility when we became a fiscal agent. Essentially cash, this $3 million got put on our balance sheet. We also have an equal liability when we get to the next page here. Restricted investments, this is deposits with bond trustees, so this relates to our revenue bonds. So it is our debt service fund, our debt service reserve fund, and our renewal and replacement fund. That decreased about $1 million, and that's primarily related to in past years we had more than we needed in our renewal and replacement fund. So consistent with the general bond resolution, we were able to transfer some funds back into operations during the year, and we'll evaluate that each year at June 30th. Just jumping to liabilities. Liabilities are up $1.3 million. I'll start at the top and work my way down. Current liabilities fairly in line with prior year. You'll see this new addition, which has the offset on in assets for the EEU being a fiscal agent. Just want to call out here, net pension liability increased 1.3 million. That's going to be related to increased pension expense, not quite offset by contributions made to the plan, plus some actuarial other items are involved there. And then that is offset. Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask, is this to try and address the frequent every year we wait for the city to respond? Is that what that is?
So this the net pension liability or the actuarial items?
The liability. I recall that every year we sort of wait for the city to give us a final, estimate in terms of what the cost will be with regards to pensions, and then we have to, make budget adjustments accordingly.
Yep, so that information does come from the city. We do get it towards the end of closing out the year, but this, and I think in previous years it might have been delayed, but this year everything went pretty smoothly with getting the information that we needed. And this is BED's portion of the total citywide net pension liability.
Okay.
And then revenue bonds, you can see decreased by 1.8 million. That's just going to be due to the payments that we made during the year. Everything else fairly consistent with current liabilities. I'll jump down to net position. See total net position decreased 971K or 972K, and that is directly related to the net loss that we had for fiscal 2020, which we'll see now as I move to the income statement. So I have it kind of I'm just going to jump down to the bottom. So this decrease in net position, or this is the net loss that we had for the year, the 972K, compared to a $1.4 million loss the previous year. So just want to call out that despite, working through the pandemic, we still landed in a better year in 2020 than we were in 2019. Operating revenue, so sales to customers, were down about 2.2 million. This is pretty directly related to COVID. Total operating expenses, so revenues down 2.2 million. This is offset by operating expenses also being down by 3.3 million, primarily related to production expenses and purchase tower expenses being down compared to 2019. And total non-operating revenue is down $1.5 million compared to last year, and that's largely related to the sale of the Highgate plant that happened in FY19. So those are the highlights on the income statement. The cash flow is pretty small, and there's a lot going on here, but essentially your cash and cash equivalents, this is what ties to your balance sheet. We were during fiscal 2020, we're up $3.9 million in cash. And that is a function of, your operating activities, your capital loan related financing activities, your non-capital financing activities, and your investing activities.
So I must start on this one. Can you enlarge this?
Yeah.
I have my glasses on. Thank you.
So this is, the amount that ties into our balance sheet, the amount of cash that we had at the end of FY 2020. The 3.9 million is the increase during 2020, which is comprised of a lot of things that go into it. But one item I'll just call out is the EEU, roughly $3 million that we received during the year to become the fiscal agent contributed to that, and that's probably one of the bigger chunks there. Without getting into the weeds of the cash flow, I'll probably jump into September financial results unless anyone has questions. Okay.
Sorry, I might have missed this because I wasn't in the meeting last week, but the fiscal agent for the EEU dollars beforehand was Efficiency Vermont?
No, the state had a separate fiscal agent, and I do not recall, I think it was Batchelder and Associates, if I'm remembering correctly. And now, And now each EEU is going to be their own fiscal agent.
Interesting.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Before I jump into the September results, I'll just share this slide here, which we've been showing each month, showing the monthly COVID impact. So for September, you can see that we're down 3%. Residential impact. So for a while we were seeing residential sales that were up quite a bit. Now that the cooling season is behind us, residential has come back to a more normal level, which is good for our residential customers. Commercial sales have continued. We've kind of closed that gap a little bit further, so it results in net down 3%. We're envisioning October to kind of follow and be within that range. This data is only through mid-October, so we'll have an update there. But you'll see that this down 3% is going to translate into our financial results in September. Okay. So for the month of September, we had a net loss of $343K compared to a budgeted net loss of $509K, so $165K favorable. Sales to customers were down $195K. So the last couple of months we've had, when residential sales were offsetting our commercial that was down, it was kind of netting to zero. And this month, we don't have anything really offsetting the COVID impacts, and this is a trend that could continue, and we're just going to keep an eye on. So sales to customers down, largely related to COVID. Other revenues, this is related to EEU. There's a similar offset in operating expenses. Power supply expenses is favorable by 21K, but there's a couple of things going on in there. Fuel expense is favorable by 182K, and that truly is timing and is a function of the shutdown in September versus, it's usually done in April, so those budgeted dollars just didn't get shifted. So that one truly is timing. And then that favorable 182K variance is offset by increased purchase power expenses and increased transmission expenses, netting to the 21,000. Operating expenses are favorable, 434,000. Again, largely timing related. And we are evaluating all of these items each month to make sure that they truly are timing related, to understand if it's kept savings or if it's going to come back. 234K relates to outside services. 71-ish K is related to EEU, and that's that offset up here. And then we have some materials and supplies saving or timing related savings, and a little bit of labor and overhead true savings. That is pretty much most of the variance for September. Year to date, coming in at $2 million versus budget of 1.3, so we're up 700K, which is really good that we're off to a good start in the fiscal year. But we do expect a lot of this favorable variance will flip as we work through the year. It's just something we'll continue to keep an eye on.
Well, and to clarify, the negative 509,000 budget, that was what had been updated during COVID.
The budget was updated, I want to say, in April time frame. So yeah, it did. Emily, could you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it did have some impacts of COVID factored in.
No, actually, we didn't assume COVID impacts on sales to customers, for example. So we, as you may recall, commissioners, presented a budget, under normal circumstances, and then did contingency planning on the side for how we would deal with COVID impacts were they to continue. But we did not build the budget assuming anything about how long or how severe the pandemic would continue. that's a budgeted loss essentially based on the timing of expected inflows and outflows. Some months we budget for a positive variance, some we budget for a negative.
That's right. Was the update in April largely related to capital shifts because of FY20? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Yeah, yeah. And then it was an update to FY20 itself, like the remainder of the year, not to the proposed FY21 budget.
So does it make some sense I mean, all the numbers are going up. And as much as I hope that my children will not come back to 5 days a week of homeschooling, does it make some sense? Not because I don't love them, but it's just really hard to work full time while teaching, and I'm not a good teacher. Does it make some sense to try to assess, what it looks like if there's no vaccine until, say, next September?
Yeah, one of the things that we're working on is kind of reforecasting the period and then also looking at what are the risks. If it's not included in our forecast, then what risks and opportunities do we have in quantifying those? So that will be done as part of that exercise, but we haven't specifically done it on sales to customers yet.
Yeah, and maybe you don't focus on residential. You focus on, UVM and some of the major, large C&I customers, because that's clearly what ends up being impacted the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions on the income statement?
Commissioners?
All good here.
All set.
Okay. Just jumping down to capital spending, actual spend of 1.7 million compared to budget of 2.7, so down $1 million. If you remember back to last month, I think we were under budget by about 1.1 million, so kind of starting to close that gap. We are expecting it to be timing. The biggest piece is this general plant, and that is going to be related to timing of IT forward, as well as timing of a data center upgrade that we had budgeted, and it will be done later in the fiscal year.
So I think that's why I was asking about IT forward. When you say later in the fiscal year, I mean, do we think we're going to roll this over into the next fiscal year, or do you? And that's probably not a question for you, Andrea, but.
Emily, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. It's a multi-system, multi-year effort, right? So it will be phased in to both moderate the rate of capital spend, but also to moderate the amount of effort involved by all of our staff who will be working hard and needing to be engaged in implementing the multiple systems that we're contemplating purchasing. So it's a yes and yes. Yes, it will begin this fiscal year. We're targeting January for a kickoff, but then a yes, it will continue for the next couple fiscal years as well.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
One of the things that we're evaluating in terms of like the risks and opportunities that could come at us during fiscal 2021 is if IT forward, timing shifted out of 2021 and into 2022, and if labor comes back to the P&L, what does that look like for us? Things like that. Total operating cash, 12.2 million compared to budget of 9.6. So we're up 2.6 million, up 3 million for the ban that was received in July versus the GO bond that was budgeted in December. We're also lagging a bit in capital, so it should be up 4 million. And then we're offset by kind of our beginning balance cash of where we started the year versus where we thought we were going to end fiscal 2020. And total operating cash, I know through the end of October is about 11.4, and that 12.2 down to 11.4 is pretty consistent. If you look at the budget of what happens from September to October, it also drops about that $1 million. So and debt service coverage ratio 3.64 and adjusted of 0.91. That is up a little bit from last month, and our days cash on hand of 154 feeling pretty strong, and that's going to again be largely related to receiving the GO bond or the ban, and capital lagging a bit. Any questions on financial update? Okay, that's all I have. Also, congratulations, Gabrielle.
Thank you. Any sense on if and when the 3.64 might raise some eyebrows?
I think we're okay with the 3.64. It's we're going to have to continue to track the adjusted debt service coverage ratio, because our debt covenant is the 1.25, so we have plenty of room with the debt service coverage ratio. And then the days cash on hand is another one that we're going to want to make sure that we monitor closely.
That looks pretty good, but thanks, Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions from other commissioners?
All set.
Okay, so thank you, both Darren and Andrea. Next up, we have the BED 2020 property and the overall renewal discussion. I couldn't tell if this was a vote or just a discussion, but.
No longer asking for a vote, just information and discussion. Can you see my screen?
Yes, but you might want to enlarge it for, you know.
I will, absolutely. No one's got worse vision than I can. So. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If last night staying awake didn't put you to sleep, this should do it. So I'm going to scroll through. I gave you again the timing. I apologize, a little late. With the meeting getting moved up, we're constantly in negotiations, and Paul Plunkett, Hickok, and Boardman, this is still going down. So these aren't final, but darn close. So that's why you just got the information just prior to the meeting. So all that's background. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask me any questions. I'm just going to roll through these 4 slides of talking points and then answer any questions you might have. Okay, so what's covered? This is the annual property boiler machinery renewal that comes up every year. You may remember a lot of stuff we went through last year. This is physical assets. So this is everything that's tangible, from the buildings to computers to transformers. It's all rolled up into one big number. Our current status, our current property boiler machinery coverage, prior to last year, we've had AIG as a single insurer on this policy, which is a beast, by far our largest policy. We ran into all kinds of issues last year with AIG at one point only offering to write 30% capacity. So Paul Plunkett worked very hard to really, quite frankly, over a long time, reached out to AIG, still wanted 30% of our business, StarTech, Zurich, and Aegis. So that's somewhat unique. We had 4 major property carriers on the line here on this policy. One policy, 4 carriers. It's scheduled to expire on November 20th. And we paid $579,330 last policy year, if you will. A substantial jump, again, for those that were around. We were in the 200,000s for 10 to 12 years. So that was a significant jump. What's in the handouts, again, I'm going to talk with the talking points here, but I also gave you the Hickok and Boardman cover letter that we got late last night with some revisions throughout today. The same historical exhibit that I always give you, shows the last 20, 25 years of our property boiler machinery history, and a very handy chart, a quota share program chart that basically tells you who's placing what business, what percentage, and at what premium. So that's all in your handout, and can certainly answer questions based on that. So what's new this year? Again, because of last year's surprise, if you will, we learned that 30 days, I think, before the policy came up. Paul and company have been working very hard with this. They canvassed 25 carriers. We typically try to go out to bid every 3 years. That's pretty much out the door. It's probably happening every year now. It happened last year. We went up from 25 to 30 carriers. We have the exact same 4 carriers that are going to write the business this year. In addition, Paul reached out. These are big hitters: Travelers, Liberty Mutual, Hartford Steam and Boiler, Factory Mutual. A lot of them declined or just prices were way too high. So AIG again this year, we learned this about 2 or 3 days ago, wants to reduce their capacity. Again, they write 30% of the McNeil and the non-McNeil portion. They want to reduce that to 25%. So that 5% we don't want. We want 100% like we had last year. So Hickok and Boardman is in constant negotiations with them and the others to try to fill in this 5%. The renewal premium is anticipated to increase from $579 to $629, and that's important to understand. That excludes right now, as we sit, that missing 5%. Hickok and Boardman estimates it might cost us another 30 grand. It might not be that much, but he'd rather act conservatively to fill this void with AIG. So our total estimated premium for this policy year would go up to $659, $685. That's a big number. Similar to last year, our total insurable value, and that means from the finance department, where we get a statement of everything that we try to ensure that we own, will be capped at $175 million. That's just the way it was last year. Our total fully scheduled TIV, if you will, is $258. So it's not as shocking as it sounds, because obviously the McNeil station alone is $181 million. And because the Pine Street, McNeil, and Winooski One Hydro, they're separate locations, it would be pretty difficult to have one loss to take out all those properties at the same time. So you can think of it that $175 million basically is covering the McNeil station at a full replacement. I put in this last bit, this is just for my own sake, as shocking as some of these premium numbers appear to be. Just 3 years ago, we went out in our normal 3-year bid, and we got bids. The second closest bid to AIG at the time was Travelers at $515,000 and some change. And then Liberty Mutual and Chubb were going to combine at $683. So I think I remember using the same language last year. We had it good, if you will, that we were in the 200,000s for like 10 to 12 years. And now we're in something that is high, but it's not outside the realm of something we already were quoted just 2 or 3 years ago. So cognizant of time, the proposal, Hickok and Boardman, that they're working with not just today, but future options to consider. If we're going to continually have these premium increases of significance, I already mentioned prior that they've gone back. They've appealed AIG's decision to lower their capacity by 5% and to try to offset that, if you will, by raising our deductible. We have 6 or 7 different layers of deductibles, the lowest being $25,000 for just common property around the building, up to the turbines, what they call property equipment breakdown, of $250,000. So we're considering raising that from $250,000 to $500,000 in exchange for AIG to write us that 5% capacity. In lieu of this, another option that we don't typically want to do, but we could lower the actual TIV, our total insurable value, by the same amount of premium that would offset, which would be $7 million of our TIV to offset this 5% change. So that's on the table also. And then a host of other things that aren't going to happen tomorrow, but I think in the next 3 months, 12 months, these are things that we're going to consider with Hickok and Boardman leading the charge. To combine with the city, I'm not a big fan for dilution of limits, meaning the more people you have on your policy, there's just more people are spreading that wealth around. But to combine with the city on their directors and officers insurance, that protects you as the commissioners and us, eliminates perhaps our professional liability. I signed up for professional liability insurance in 1997, and that's a very unique coverage for an engineering department only. And so we've never used it, but it's there. And so we may, if we have to save some money, it's about 25 grand, eliminate our PL insurance and join with the city on their PL coverage because it's under their D&O. We have a 5-year environmental pollution policy. We might move that just to save some cash to 3 years. We're exploring some, and again, not today, but some workers' comp and auto. We are with the city on their workers' comp and auto through Travelers. And so those are some things that if might help both parties if we were to break away. And if that's an option, saves us some money and doesn't hurt the city, we might consider that. We might even combine with the city on a property policy. Every insurance company has what's called a minimum premium. So some premiums are too high for us, but if we were to combine with the city, we might now meet that threshold. And finally, continued diligence on completing carrier engineering recommendations. So any insurance company who has their own engineers, they're sent out to study specifically the McNeil station, obviously with the plant, the boilers, and give us a host of recommendations. We've worked very hard. Muneer and Company have worked very hard in trying to cross those off the list. I think we had 21 last year. Some of them just aren't possible or feasible. or certainly not within the confines of municipal utilities budget constraints. So there's some things that in a perfect world we'd love to do, but we just don't have the money to do it. So all those things that Hickok and Boardman is working on, and we will work together on to try to keep this premium in somewhat in check. And we're getting to the end here. I know Lori's happy about that. The impact on the budget. So our fiscal 21 budget amount was $560,000 and change. Remind you that budget gets put together in January of 20 and then gets adopted in June of 20. Because the policy renews, it used to renew 10-1, it got moved to 10-11, 11-1, 11-20. Last year was pretty chaotic with the moving of the dates. But we had 4 months at the current known amount of 579, and then 8 months at the projected amount. So that's how you end up with the 560. So as a math major, there's a lot of ways you can spin a number, but basically that increase that we're expecting to see, this 629, that's without the 5%, or the 659 with that 5% capacity, will range, you can see over here, anywhere from 8.7% up to 17.7. Big numbers, but not shocking. I mean, I read insurance and risk management magazines every day. This has long been projected. We were thinking anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20% that we would see an increase, even on top of what we got hit with last year. So I'm not comfortable with these, but they're certainly well within the range. And my closing note, I think I can hear some clapping. Hickok and Boardman shared that, but for our excellent loss history and experience, and we do. That plan is well run. I know it was built in '84 with the shutdowns every year and all the maintenance we do on it. If we had a poor loss history, Paul Plunkett made it clear that our only option would most likely be to self-insure, meaning those 4 carriers that we have on the line right now would probably pull out, and we would be dollar for dollar paying for any losses. That is the end of it, and I'm willing and ready to answer any questions.
Commissioners?
Hi, this is Bob. The TIV is a small fraction, relatively small fraction of what we consider to be our total stuff. If we even approached insuring all of that, would it be cost prohibitive?
No, in fact, that's a great question, Bob. So we've asked that. We always, for years, had 100% of our values, but that's when we were at 225, 250. This is the most that they will write us, 175 million, based on their capacity. So, and because it's and as a statistician, the maximum probable loss. So 175 million is the most they're willing to risk, even though they know that these are at 3 different locations. So we long talked about, what if we lower it to 150, 125? And they're saying the exposure is still out there, so we can chop up that pie as much as we want. They're only going to show us 175, and their underwriters are going to rate us at that.
Okay, but then when they say they won't go above that limit, presumably somebody would if you paid for it. And I guess the argument is that's megabucks, right?
Yeah, that's megabucks, and quite frankly, they're told by their parent companies and their board of directors they don't want any more capacity. So even if we were willing to pay 175, because when they have a loss in that world of boilers. They had a significant one, not obviously us, but in the United States, it cost them $254 million. So when they have a loss with a biomass plant, it's going to be significant. So they don't want to take on any more, and no one's even discussed what that might be. It would definitely be cost prohibitive.
Well, sorry to push this, but I will anyway. We're working through Hickok and Boardman. They're kind of brokers to their larger insurance world, and they have come up with their favorites that have worked for us for a long time. But if we started from scratch, I know that's not easy, and just said we want to find a collection of companies that would cover our TIV, a real TIV, could we do it? Or would it just be so expensive?
It would be so expensive, or just really they wouldn't want any interest on it. So remember, we went out to 25, they went out to 25 carriers, and you wouldn't want to place your business with a carrier that's AM Best or Moody's isn't well rated. So these are the big players and the only ones that are even willing to look at us. And if they price it, would be I'm afraid to guess 700, 800, 900,000 it'd be significantly higher.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Sorry, are you giving are we looking at these 4 choices, 2 of which expose us to some degree?
What meaning? What, Scott? They'll be the same.
There's two options. without missing that 5%,
Oh.
there's two options with the
Gotcha. Great question.
5%.
Yeah,
It's just-
we're hoping with Hickok and Borman probably by the end of this week, if not early next week, we'll know whether we can negotiate with AIG to write us that additional 5% so that we would have the same coverage that we had last year. If they're unwilling to do that, that's when Hickok and Borman might negotiate, or we might start trading a little bit by either lowering our TIV, or we'd end up going with 5% less, and we don't want to do that. So some of the other carriers, Aegis has also shown some interest in that, covering that 5% if AIG doesn't. So that's to be determined. But it's really not two options. It's just we want the full 5% added back in, and we'll know shortly in a day or two, I would think.
And what are your, I'm sure on that there was a slide where you had that listed. What I guess I'm looking for, do you have a specific route that you want to go with that of something that's what that give and take is going to be to get that 5%?
Yeah, it was 30. Well, I don't want to say not to exceed, but it was probably Paul Plunkett wanted to be conservative, mentioned 30 grand to get us to do that. He said it might be a little bit less, but he thinks it's going to be around that number, and that would get us to the 659,685 quote.
Gotcha.
So that's as most that we would expect. And again, years past, it wasn't to waste people's time, but it's just a significant amount that we want more information. It's 1 year deal, and it's already in the budget. So that's why we're not asking for a vote. And we're going to be consistent with the Board of Finance and City Council along those lines too.
And does that number just our portion of, do the joint owners also have some
Yes, no, great question.
liability in there?
Yeah, that's the full cost. And so it gets split based on the property value. So the McNeil Station will pay 50% of whatever gets charged to the McNeil Station. And it used to be like 72% if I had to guess or something. It's fairly significant.
So how much would that cut the 659 off relative to what you had budgeted? What, 579?
Yeah, it would be, I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but it would be about 72%, about 36% of that number would be charged to the joint owner. So, yeah, I can get that breakdown for you and send that to you.
Anything from Commissioner Shagnon?
No, well said. Thank you.
Paul, is the driving force here that biomass plants are generally getting older and therefore the insurance companies are seeing more claims, or what?
Yeah, great question.
As we start to look at district heating system, like what's driving this?
Yep, great question. So I knew you would. I wish I could show you my chart right here. What's driving it?
I can imagine it, Paul.
Yeah, you can imagine. I won't show it. Reduced capacity. So what's driving it? Reduced capacity, the hard market, adverse claims on our industry. No question about it. So obviously not McNeil Station, but across the United States in general, biomass plants with that age and with things that can go wrong, even though ours has been, knock on wood, very good. The investment portfolio, very poor in this industry. Extreme weather, wildfire, catastrophes. That makes the carriers very selective. So even though we may go out to 25, you've got the same 3 or 4 carriers are even willing to quote us, and all that combination, all those factors drives the rates right up through the roof. And that's what we're facing with now. Saw it last year, we're seeing it again this year, and it's hard to predict. But hopefully it's going to soften. We'll never see the mid 200,000s again, but it'd be nice to get down to about 400 grand or so.
And also some consistency. I really appreciate your, forward-looking bullets that are trying to figure out how to try to bring this in a little bit, so it's not like, oh, every year. Yeah,
it's kind of shocking and disturbing, but it's
right
not.
A follow-up question. So you mentioned fires and all that. That's a broader insurance concern, right? That's not biomass plant.
Oh. Right. Yeah. But no, absolutely not just biomass. In fact, just in general, you may think that we're a separate piece of the pie, but it's no different than your homeowners. If you pay homeowners for 30 years and never have a loss, and all of a sudden your rates go up by 10%, there's been an exposure. It could be on the golf course, course, down south, Florida, golf course, all those things are impacted. So same with your auto insurance. So you've never had, if your 6-year-old son's driving the red Camaro, you know what, boom, you're going to see an increase in premium, even if he's had a spotless record.
So here's a question. Is this basically for McNeil? And if so, did we was that factored into that economic balance done from McNeil?
When you say for McNeil, Bob, yeah, that's what's driving the increase. So if we were just trying to insure this building or just Winooski and Hydro, we'd have separate rates and it would be cheaper. But it's one policy covers all our exposures with different premiums. The Winooski and Hydro, I think I shared last year, it's usually about 15 cents per $100 of coverage. So versus about 8 or 9 cents for a normal 100% coverage for this building and those kind of things. So it does get all priced separately based on the exposure.
Okay.
So we just heard the financials. It's great to see, September a little bit higher. What does this look like in terms of budgetary impact if it ends up being on the higher end of the outcome?
I remember you asked me that last year. We have a contingency. It's not like we budgeted what is I think I budgeted $551,000 for this line. Obviously, it's going to be higher, so that money's got to come from somewhere. But as finance has taught me, it's one pool of money, and it's going to come from us, one place or another.
So we haven't looked at that yet, which is okay.
Well, no, I know Andrew's group. They know this potential increase, and so it's there. But we do have a contingency fund. I don't pretend to know how much that is, but.
So can you guys give us an update since we're not voting? Can you give us an update in our December meeting?
Absolutely.
Great. And also,
go ahead.
Yeah, beyond Paul, what the results are to the finance team, if you can give us a sense of the, budgetary adjustments that may be required.
Yeah, no problem.
Great.
Thank you. Scott, and I'll send out to you some of the breakdowns on the McNeil piece and try to pronounce Gulf Coast better next time. I didn't even stay up late.
We knew where you were going.
Good, thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul.
You're welcome.
So next up, we have a non-disclosure agreement. This is VELCO, VEIC, and Vermont Distribution Utilities, or DUs. This is to discuss cybersecurity issues. This is a discussion and a vote. And Emily, thanks for teeing this up.
Yeah, you're welcome. So this non-disclosure agreement that we're bringing to you tonight is the result of a PUC docket or a PUC order that was issued in September, closing out a docket that dates back actually to, I think, 2007. So it was quite a lengthy regulatory process on this. But the PUC came out with 6 total principles, that is what they called it, relating to cybersecurity for utilities. And 2 of them are mentioned in the memo, the cover memo here, and in the agreement related to information sharing among the Vermont distribution utilities, VELCO, VEPSA, and VEIC, and the Department of Public Service. So essentially, in order to implement the practices and principles that the PUC ordered, the order refers to under terms of an appropriate non-disclosure agreement to protect confidentiality and sensitive cybersecurity information, which, if released, could have obviously negative impacts on grid reliability and grid security. So this agreement was prepared by primarily, I think VELCO took the lead on authoring it with input and feedback and comments from all of the parties. So we are seeking commission recommendation to the city council to authorize the general manager of BED to execute it. There's no financial impact here whatsoever. The reason that we're seeking council approval to execute is because there is an indefinite term here, which we anticipate will extend beyond 1 year, which is our limit of contracting authority without prior approval. I think I've summarized everything. So happy to take any questions, and would ask for a recommendation or a motion to recommend to forward for council to approve execution.
Any questions, comments from commissioners? So generally, from my perspective, go ahead, Bob.
Well, as usual, the question is there any downside at all to this? I don't see it. That was the question. Is there any downside about this?
None that I would be able to identify now.
Okay.
So my question was, I think this makes sense. I can understand the background and the rationale for it. I guess my question is, I don't see sort of like an endpoint or a check-in point. And I think checks and balances are good. And any thoughts on that? Is there a sense of like, is there a point at which, just to make sure nothing's gone awry, we revisit the agreement?
I could maybe jump in on that point just briefly. For this type of agreement, being that it's a non-disclosure, kind of intended to facilitate information exchange among the utilities with the regulator, there probably wouldn't. You probably wouldn't want to have a date by which there was an expiration, because we want the obligation, if we share sensitive information or others share it with us, we would like that obligation to continue essentially in perpetuity. Lest there be some opportunity to disclose potentially harmful information because the agreement expired and somebody didn't choose to renew it. So typically we would agree that, we wouldn't have a contract for power, for example, in perpetuity, but for something like this, there's a benefit in terms of protecting our sensitive information.
Sure.
Makes sense.
So I think it's page 27 of the PDF packet. If there are any further discussion points, we can take those on. Otherwise, if someone wants to make a motion.
I don't have the pack. Whoops, wait a minute. I don't have the packet in front of me, but I moved that staff be authorized to follow through on this proposal.
Does that work?
I'd like some more specificity in that language.
All right. Well, you know where to.
So
I think
what it says is the Board of Electric Commissioners recommend that the City Council approve this resolution to execute the non-disclosure agreement with the other entities.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. But it can't come from me.
I'll second that motion.
Commissioner Shagnon,
Aye.
Commissioner Herendeen,
Aye.
Commissioner Moody,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes.
Thanks, and that brings us to Commissioner's check-in. Any items to bring up? Is that your hot water heater in your background, Darren?
That is my solar hot water heater. glad to show it off for the meeting.
I know. I'm like, doesn't sound like there are any comments or questions.
Not this time.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Commissioner Shagnon,
Aye.
Commissioner Herendeen,
Aye.
Commissioner Moody,
Aye.
Commissioner Stebbins.
Aye.
Thank you. We adjourn 6:43.
Thank you, everybody at BED. I know you guys are working hard. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, be well.
Bye.